The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than most cities and served as the meeting place for the Galactic Council. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports every day. Today was special. Today, the humans were coming to ask for membership. Kim Taeho stepped off the transport ship wearing a simple black suit. He carried a plain briefcase and walked with quiet steps. Nothing about him seemed important or dangerous. He looked like any office worker from Earth. His assistant, Park Minji, followed behind him with a tablet in her hands. She wore the blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. "Sir, the council chamber is this way," Minji said, pointing down a long corridor. The walls were made of some kind of metal that changed colors as they walked. Alien writing covered the surfaces, glowing, softly in languages humans were still learning to read. Taeho nodded but said nothing. His dark eyes looked straight ahead. Other diplomats moved past them in the hallway. Some had scales, others had fur. A few floated in glass tanks filled with water. They all stared at the humans as they passed. Most of them were not friendly. Stares. Ambassador Vextar, a tall reptile with green skin and golden eyes, blocked their path. He wore robes covered in jewels that showed his high rank among the Saurians. "So these are the famous humans," he said, his voice hissing with each word. "You look smaller than I expected." "We are honored to meet you, Ambassador," Taeho replied. His voice was calm and quiet. Too calm, Vextar thought. Most species showed some fear or excitement when meeting the council for the first time. This, humans showed nothing. "Honored," Vextar repeated, laughing. "We shall see how honored you feel after the council votes." He moved aside, but his tail swept dangerously close to Taeho's legs. The humans simply stepped around it without looking. Down. They reached the main chamber where the Galactic Council met. The room was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up toward the ceiling. Each section was designed for different types of beings. Some seats were filled with water. Others had special air for species that could not breathe the standard atmosphere. High Chancellor Morden sat at the center. He was an insect-like creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in all directions. His voice buzzed when he spoke. "The human delegation may approach," he announced. Taeho walked to the center of the room. His shoes made soft sounds on the metal floor, but somehow the sound seemed louder than it should be. Several delegates noticed that the temperature in the room had dropped slightly. The lights above Taeho flickered for just a moment. "I am Kim Taeho, representing Earth and all human colonies," he said. His voice carried clearly through the chamber without any amplification. "We come in peace seeking membership in this council." Ambassador Korath, who lived in one of the water-filled seats, spoke through a translation device. "Humans have been in space for only 50 years. Most species here have traveled between stars for thousands of years. What makes you think you deserve a place among us?" Taeho turned to face the aquatic delegate. For a moment, Korath felt something cold touch his mind. It was like swimming in the deepest ocean trench where no light could reach. The feeling passed quickly, but it left him uncomfortable. "We believe all intelligent species deserve representation," Taeho answered. "We do not ask for special treatment, only for the chance to prove ourselves." General Krixanar, a heavily armored reptilian with scars covering his face, stood up in his section. "Prove yourselves? Your species barely survived first contact with the Zelani pirates. Your technology is primitive, your military is weak. Why should we waste time with such a minor species?" "Our military capabilities may surprise you, General," Taeho said. Again, his voice remained perfectly calm. But somehow the general felt like he was being measured for a coffin. The strange feeling made him angry. "Are you threatening us, human?" Krixanar demanded. "Not at all," Taeho replied. "I am simply saying that appearances can be deceiving." Park Minji shifted nervously beside him. She had worked with Taeho for 6 months, but she still found him strange. She had tried to find information about his background, but the files were mostly classified. What she did know made no sense. According to his medical records, he had been sick with a terminal disease 2 years ago. Then suddenly he was healthy and recruited for diplomatic service. But he never ate anything during their long journey to Nexus Prime. He never seemed to sleep either. Dr. Yex, a being that looked like a walking tree, spoke from his section. The humans show interesting stress patterns, he observed. His species could sense emotions from other beings. But this one, he pointed at Taiho, shows no stress at all. In fact, I detect no emotions from him at all. Most curious. High Chancellor Mordun's compound eyes focused on Taiho. Perhaps the human delegation would like to present their formal request? Taiho opened his briefcase. Inside were documents printed on earth paper. As he lifted them out, several electronic devices around the chamber began to malfunction. The lights flickered again. A delegate's communication device sparked and went dead. Technical difficulties, announced a maintenance worker over the speakers. We are looking into the problem. Taiho began to read from the documents. As he spoke, his shadow seemed to move independently on the floor. Several delegates noticed this but convinced themselves it was a trick of the lighting. One delegate tried to record the session, but his device showed only static when pointed at the human. Earth requests full membership in the Galactic Council, Taiho read. We offer our knowledge, our resources, and our friendship to all species represented here. We ask only for fair treatment and the rights granted to all member species. Ambassador. Vextar stood up. And what happens if we refuse? Will you humans declare war on us? He laughed, and several other delegates joined him. Taiho looked directly at Vextar. For a moment, the reptilian diplomat saw something impossible in the human's eyes. It was like looking into an empty void where nothing could ever exist. The laughter died in his throat. We hope that will not be necessary, Taiho said quietly. The session continued for several hours. Questions were asked and answered. The humans provided information about their technology, their population, and their intentions. Through it all, Taiho remained perfectly calm and polite. As the day ended, High Chancellor Mordun announced that the Council would vote tomorrow. The human delegation may rest in the quarters provided for them, he said. As Taiho walked out of the chamber, maintenance workers were still trying to fix the electronic problems that had started when he arrived. Behind him, delegates whispered among themselves about the strange human diplomat who cast no reflection in the polished metal walls. Park Minji hurried to keep up with his steady pace. She wanted to ask him about the technical problems, about the way some delegates had looked frightened, about the cold feeling in the air around him. But something told her not to ask. Some questions, she realized, were better left unanswered. In their quarters that night, Taiho stood by the window looking out at the stars. He did not sleep. He did not eat. He simply stood there, waiting for tomorrow, when the Galactic Council would make the biggest mistake in their history. The next morning brought new problems. Several council members had experienced the same nightmare during the night. They dreamed of a figure in a black suit standing in darkness, surrounded by the bones of dead civilizations. When they woke up, they could not remember the figure's face, but they remembered the cold feeling of absolute ending. Park Minji found Taiho exactly where she had left him the night before. He was still standing by the window, still looking at the stars. His suit was perfectly pressed as if he had just put it on. Sir, did you sleep at all? She asked. I rested, he replied without turning around. Are you ready for today's session? She nodded, though she felt tired from her own restless night. Something about this place made her uncomfortable. The walls seemed to whisper when no one was listening. The shadows moved wrong. And her boss, who she thought she knew, was becoming more mysterious every hour. In the council chamber, the mood was different from the day before. The delegates sat further apart from each other. Several wore protective devices that they claimed were for translation, but Park Minji suspected they were trying to block something else. High Chancellor Mordun called the session to order. The council has reviewed the human request for membership, he buzzed. We have concerns. Ambassador Korath spoke from his water tank. Your species is too young, too aggressive, and too unpredictable. Perhaps in another 100 years, we can discuss this again. That is not acceptable, Taiho said. His voice was still calm, but the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Ice began to form on the metal surfaces near him. General Krixnar stood up, his armor clanking. You are in no position to make demands, human. Your entire species could be wiped out by any one of our fleets. Could they? Taiho asked. He turned to look at the general, and for a moment, Krixnar saw his own death. Not just his personal death, but the death of his species, his planet, his entire civilization. The vision lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. Dr. Yex spoke up, his tree-like branches rustling with concern. The emotional readings from this human are most disturbing. I sense something vast and cold like the space between galaxies. This is not normal for any species I know. Ambassador Vextar slammed his clawed hand on his desk. Enough of this mystery. What are you hiding, human? What trick is this? Taiho smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. It was not a pleasant smile. No tricks, Ambassador. I am exactly what I appear to be, a diplomat here to negotiate in good faith. But even as he said it, the lights in the chamber began to flicker more violently. Electronic systems throughout the station were failing one by one. In the security office, monitors showed static whenever they tried to focus on the human diplomat. Park Minji watched her tablet screen go dark. She tried to restart it, but nothing happened. Around the chamber, other delegates were having the same problem with their devices. Only the basic life support system seemed to be working normally. High Chancellor Morden's compound eyes swiveled toward Taiho. These technical problems began when you arrived. Explain this. I cannot explain your technical problems, Taiho replied. Perhaps your systems are not as advanced as you believed. In the private booth reserved for observers, Captain Yoon Jiwan watched through reinforced glass. He was the head of human security for the diplomatic mission, but he had been ordered to stay hidden unless absolutely necessary. His job was to observe and report back to Earth. What he saw made him uncomfortable. The alien delegates were clearly afraid of something, but his instruments could not detect any threats. Taiho appeared to be just a man in a suit, but the captain's instincts told him otherwise. He had served in the war against the Zelani pirates, and he knew what danger felt like. This was danger, but unlike anything he had encountered before. Meanwhile, in a secure communication room, several council members held a secret meeting. Ambassador Vextar paced back and forth, his tail lashing with anger. This human is not normal. Our sensors cannot get clear readings on him. Our recording devices fail around him. He knows things he should not know. General Krixnar nodded grimly. During yesterday's session, he mentioned the Battle of Kepler Station. That battle was classified information. No human should know the details of our casualties. And he spoke to me in Old Saurian, Vextar added. That language has been dead for 3,000 years. It exists only in our most ancient archives. Ambassador Korith floated nervously in his tank. My people's historians say he used words in our dialogue that have never been translated into any other language. Words that describe concepts only we understand. Dr. Yex rustled his branches with worry. I have studied thousands of species. I have never encountered a being that shows no emotional patterns at all. Even artificial intelligences show some form of processing activity. This human shows nothing. It is as if he is not truly alive. High Chancellor Morden listened to their concerns. As the leader of the council, he had access to information that others did not. 3 days ago, their deep space sensors had detected something approaching the station. Not the human transport ship, but something else. Something that their instruments could not properly identify. It had arrived at the same time as the humans, but it had no physical form that they could detect. What do you recommend? He asked the group. General Krixnar's scarred face twisted into a grin. I recommend we send a message to all species in the galaxy. We show them what happens to those who try to deceive the council. We make an example of this human. You want to kill a diplomat during peace negotiations? Dr. Yex asked, shocked. I want to kill whatever that thing is before it kills us, Krixnar replied. My warriors are already in position. One word from you, Chancellor, and we can end this threat. In the main chamber, the session continued. Taiho sat patiently as the council members made increasingly unreasonable demands. They wanted Earth to become a protected world under council supervision. They wanted humans to give up space travel. They wanted Earth's resources to be managed by alien corporations. These terms are not acceptable, Taiho said after each demand. His voice never changed, but each time he spoke, more electronic systems failed throughout the station. Park Minji leaned close to him and whispered, "Sir, maybe we should contact Earth for new instructions." "That will not be necessary," Taiho replied. Earth's instructions were very clear. She wanted to ask what those instructions were, but something in his tone stopped her. Instead, she looked around the chamber and noticed something that made her blood run cold. Every delegate was staring at Taiho, but none of them were casting shadows on the walls behind them. Every being in the room had a shadow except for her boss. The session ended with no agreement reached. High Chancellor Morden announced that they would vote on the human request the next day. Until then, the human delegation should consider whether they wished to accept the council's generous terms. As they walked back to their quarters, Park Minji finally found the courage to ask her question. "Sir, what exactly are Earth's instructions if the council refuses our reasonable requests?" Taiho stopped walking and turned to look at her, just a moment. She saw something impossible in his eyes. She saw the heat death of the universe, the moment when the last star would burn out and everything would be cold and dark forever. "Earth's instructions are simple," he said quietly. "If they will not accept us as friends, they will accept us as something else entirely." That night, more delegates had the same nightmare. But this time, they remembered the figure's face. It was the face of the human diplomat. But his eyes were empty voids that contained the ending of all things. In the morning, they would make their decision. In the morning, they would discover what humanity had become in order to survive among the way stars. The final session began with an announcement that would change everything. A message from Earth had arrived during the night. High Chancellor Morden read it aloud to the assembled council. "The people of Earth reject the terms offered by the Galactic Council. We will not become a protected species. We will not surrender our independence. We will not give up our right to travel among the stars. We offer friendship and cooperation, but we will not accept slavery disguised as protection." Ambassador Vextar hissed with anger. "Arrogant humans, you forget that you are surrounded by our fleets. Your homeworld is defenseless." Taiho stood calmly in the center of the chamber. "Earth is far from defenseless, Ambassador, but we hope it will not come to violence." General Krixnar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "Your entire military could not defeat one of our battle groups. What defense could you possibly have?" "The same defense that brought me here," Taiho replied quietly. The temperature in the room had now dropped so low that frost was forming on the metal surfaces. Several delegates had put on protective gear to deal with the cold, but it did not help. The cold was not coming from the air. It was coming from something much deeper. Park Minji stood beside her boss, shivering not from cold but from fear. She had finally understood what she had been trying not to see for months. Taiho never ate because he did not need food. He never slept because he did not need rest. He cast no shadow because he was not entirely real. He was something else, something that wore the shape of a human like a suit of clothes. High Chancellor Morden made the announcement that sealed their fate. The Galactic Council votes to reject the human application for membership. Furthermore, we demand that Earth surrender within 30 days or face the consequences. "And if we refuse?" Taiho asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we will demonstrate why lesser species should not challenge their betters," General Krixnar said, standing up in his section. "Guards, arrest the human diplomat." 6 armed guards moved toward Taiho. They were members of different species, all trained warriors, all carrying weapons that could kill most beings instantly. Taiho made no move to resist. He simply stood there waiting. "Sir," Park Minji called, out in alarm, but Taiho raised a hand to stop her. "It is all right, Minji," he said softly. "This was always going to happen." The guards reached him and began to attach restraints to his arms. As the metal touched his skin, sparks flew from every electronic device in the chamber. The lights went out completely, leaving only emergency lighting that cast strange shadows on the walls. Commander Jax Rule stepped forward. He was a member of a cybernetic species, half machine and half organic tissue. His people were known as the greatest warriors in the galaxy. "This is what happens to those who defy the Council," he announced, raising his energy weapon. "Wait," Dr. Yex called, out from his section. "Something is wrong. My sensors are detecting massive energy readings, but they are not coming from any technology. They are coming from the human." "Impossible," Commander Jax Rule snarled. "He is just flesh and blood." He fired his weapon directly at Taiho's chest. The energy beam hit its target with perfect accuracy. The blast was powerful enough to destroy a small building. In the bright flash of the weapon's discharge, everyone in the chamber was temporarily blinded. When their vision cleared, they saw Taiho lying on the floor, motionless. His suit was burned away, revealing what should have been a human body underneath. But what they saw instead made several delegates scream in terror. There was nothing underneath the suit. No body, no bones, no blood. Just darkness. Pure, absolute darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. The darkness moved and flowed like liquid, but it had depth that went on forever. "Impossible," Commander Jax Rule whispered, backing away from the fallen figure. Then the darkness began to rise. It took the shape of a man again, but now there was no pretense of humanity. The thing that had been calling itself Kim Taiho stood up, and reality itself seemed to bend around it. When it spoke, the voice was different. It was still Taiho's voice, but now it carried other voices with it. Thousands of them, millions of them, all speaking in perfect unison. It was the voice of every being that had ever died, all speaking through one mouth. "You should not have done that," the thing said. Commander Jax Rule tried to fire his weapon again, but it would not work. In fact, no technology in the chamber worked anymore. The very presence of the revealed being was too alien for artificial systems to process. "What are you?" High Chancellor Mordoon demanded, his compound eyes wide with terror. "I am what your species call the ending," the thing replied. "I am the silence that follows the last word. I am the darkness that comes after the final light goes out. Your people have many names for me, but humans call me Death." Ambassador Vextar fell back in his seat, his golden eyes reflecting absolute terror. "That is impossible. Death is not a being. It is a concept, a natural process." "I was," Death agreed, "until your species forced humanity to make a choice, surrender or be destroyed. So they found me in the space between spaces and offered me a bargain. Give me form, give me purpose, and I would serve as their final protection." Park Minji stared at the thing that had been her boss. "Sir, are you still Taiho?" The darkness turned toward her, and for a moment she saw something almost human in the void where its face should be. "I chose to remember being him," it said, and its voice was gentler when speaking to her. "He was dying when we made our bargain. I saved his life by taking his place. I kept his memories, his personality, his desire to protect humanity. But I am no longer human." General Krixner had recovered from his initial shock and was trying to call for reinforcements on his communication device. "This changes nothing," he declared. "Our fleets will destroy Earth regardless of what you are." Death looked at him with empty eyes. "Your fleets will try," it said. Then it began to walk toward the general. With each step, the metal floor cracked beneath its feet. The cracks spread outward like a spider web, but they were not normal cracks. They were breaks in reality itself, places where the fundamental forces that held matter together simply stopped working. "Stay back," Krixnar shouted, pulling out a personal weapon. "I am not afraid of you." "You should be," Death replied. "But it does not matter. Fear me or do not fear me, love me or hate me, I am inevitable." It reached out toward the general, with one hand. The hand looked human, but where it touched the air, space itself began to decay. Commander Jaxrule, who was standing nearby, suddenly aged 50 years in 5 seconds. His cybernetic parts began to rust and crumble, and his organic parts withered like plants in a desert. "Stop!" Dr. Yex called out. "We surrender! We accept humanity's terms." Death paused and turned toward the tree-like being. "You offer surrender, now? After you attacked a diplomat under a flag of truce? After you threatened to destroy an entire species?" Ambassador Korath floated frantically in his tank. "We made a mistake. We did not know what you were." "No," Death agreed. "You did not. You saw humans as weak because we chose to send diplomats instead of warships. You mistook restraint for weakness. You confused mercy with inability." It gestured toward Commander Jaxrule, who was now aging at an accelerated rate. "This one fired upon me. He broke the ancient laws of diplomacy. What should be his fate? Please," High Chancellor Morden begged, "show mercy." Death considered this for a long moment. Around the chamber, the remaining delegates held their breath. Finally, it nodded. "Very well. I will show the same mercy that you showed to humanity." Commander Jaxrule crumbled to dust. Where he had stood, there was nothing left but empty space and the echo of a scream that would haunt the dreams of every survivor for the rest of their lives. "Now," Death said, turning back to the council, "let us discuss new terms." The remaining council members sat in stunned silence, staring at the empty space where Commander Jaxrule had been only moments before. The reality of their situation was slowly sinking in. They had not just attacked a human diplomat. They had attacked Death itself. Death moved to the center of the chamber, its form now clearly visible as living darkness shaped like a man in a ruined suit. Where it walked, the metal floor showed signs of age and decay. The very atoms seemed to grow, tired in its presence. "You want to know what humanity became?" Death said, its voice carrying the weight of every ending that had ever occurred. "Let me tell you the story." High Chancellor Morden tried to speak, but his voice came out as a terrified whisper. We will listen. 2 years ago, your species and others like you made contact with Earth. You brought gifts. You spoke of friendship. You promised a bright future among the stars. But privately, you laughed at the weak humans who had barely learned to leave their own planet. The temperature continued to drop. Now even the emergency lights were beginning to fail, one by one, as Death's presence spread through the station's systems. Then came the demands. Submit or be destroyed. Become our servants or face extinction. Every species that had ever encountered the Galactic Council had been given the same choice. All had chosen submission. Ambassador Vextar clutched his jeweled robes tighter around himself, but they provided no warmth against the cold that came from Death itself. "We offered protection," he said weakly. "You offered slavery," Death corrected. "Humanity knew this. Your own records, which we accessed, showed what happened to the last species that refused to submit. The Corvani. Their homeworld is now a dead rock, their people extinct." Dr. Yex's branches rustled with fear. "How could you access our records? They are stored in quantum encryption." "I am the ending of all things," Death replied. "Encryption is just another system that must eventually fail. All systems fail, Doctor. It is my nature to be present when they do." Park Minji found her voice, though it shook as she spoke. "What happened to Earth? What did they do?" Death turned toward her, and she saw something almost like affection in the void where its face should be. "They chose a different path. If they could not win through strength, they would win through sacrifice. Earth's greatest scientists worked in secret, searching for forces that could protect humanity from any threat. And they found you." "High," Chancellor Morden stated, beginning to understand. "They found several of us," Death confirmed. "We exist in the spaces between reality, forces that govern the fundamental rules of existence. Death, war, famine, pestilence. The humans called us by many names, but we were always there waiting." Ambassador Korath's tank began to show cracks as the water inside grew colder. "You made a deal with concepts? With abstract forces?" "We made Ourselves more than abstract, Death explained. In exchange for physical form and purpose, we agreed to serve as humanity's final protection. The cost was that we could never return to what we were before. We became bound to human will, but we retained enough independence to choose how we fulfilled our purpose. General Krixnar, who had been silent since seeing Commander Jack's rule destroyed, finally spoke up. How many of you are there? Enough, Death said simply. Kim Minho serves as your ambassador to the Zelani Federation. They believe he is negotiating trade agreements. They do not know he is War Incarnate and that their fleets age and rust whenever he visits their shipyards. The general's face went pale. The Zelani fleet, their ships have been experiencing mysterious mechanical failures. Choi Hana manages agricultural negotiations with the Centauri Republic, Death continued. They think she is helping them improve their food production. They do not realize she is famine, and that she could turn their fertile worlds into barren deserts with a thought. Dr. Yex swayed on his roots. The crop failures in the outer colonies, and Li Sujin oversees medical exchanges with various species, Death finished. They welcome her expertise in treating diseases. They do not know she is pestilence, and that plagues follow in her wake when she is displeased. The full scope of humanity's strategy was becoming clear to the surviving council members. Earth had not sent diplomats to negotiate from weakness. They had sent embodiments of fundamental cosmic forces, beings that could end civilizations with a thought. You have been living among us, Ambassador Vextar whispered. For 2 years you have been watching, learning, preparing. We have been giving you chances, Death corrected. Every species in the galaxy has had opportunities to treat with humanity fairly. Most have chosen to see humans as inferior beings to be exploited or destroyed. High Chancellor Morden's compound eyes focused on the being before him. And now you have made your choice. You attacked a diplomat under a flag of truce. You declared your intention to destroy an entire species. You have shown us what you truly are. Death raised its hand, and the remaining delegates felt a chill that went deeper than their bones. It touched the very essence of their being, the spark that separated life from emptiness. Please, Dr. Yex begged. We can change. We can do better. Can you? Death asked. Ambassador Vextar, your people keep slaves from 17 different species. General Krixnar, your fleets have destroyed 43 civilian colonies in the past decade. High Chancellor Morden, your administration has ordered the extinction of 6 species that refuse to submit to council authority. Each accusation hit like a physical blow. The delegates realized that their secrets, their hidden crimes, their classified operations were all known to this being. Dr. Yex, Death continued, turning to the tree-like alien. Your people experiment on sentient beings, claiming it is for scientific advancement. Ambassador Korath, your species enslaves other aquatic races, forcing them to work in your underwater cities until they die from exhaustion. How do you know these things? Korath demanded, his tank now showing multiple cracks from the supernatural cold. Because I was there when your victims died, Death replied. I am always there at the end. I have seen every atrocity, every murder, every genocide committed by your species and others. I have been waiting for someone to give me the power to do something about it. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of failing systems and cracking ice. The delegates were beginning to understand that they were not just facing a single being. They were facing judgment itself, given form and will by humanity's desperate need for protection. What do you want from us? High Chancellor Morden finally asked. I want you to understand what you have unleashed, Death replied. For centuries, your council has ruled through fear and violence. You have destroyed species, enslaved worlds, and committed countless atrocities in the name of galactic order. But you always faced beings who could die, who could be intimidated, who could be broken. It stepped closer to the council seats and reality warped around it. The walls showed brief glimpses of other places, other times. Scenes of battles that had not yet been fought, of worlds that had not yet fallen, of species that had not yet been born. Now you face something different, You face beings who were never alive in the way you understand life. You cannot kill us because we were never truly born. You cannot intimidate us because we have seen the end of everything. You cannot break us because we are the force that breaks all other things. Park Minji watched in horrified fascination as her former boss explained humanity's ultimate strategy. They had not built bigger weapons or stronger ships. They had made themselves into allies of the fundamental forces of existence itself. The age of the Galactic Council is ending, Death announced. A new age is beginning. An age where humanity's friends will prosper, and humanity's enemies will learn what it means to face the ending of all things. It looked around at the terrified delegates one final time. Choose wisely. This is the only warning you will receive. The silence in the council chamber stretched for long minutes. Death stood motionless in the center, waiting for the delegates to process what they had learned. Around them, Nexus Prime continued to decay. Metal surfaces showed rust and age. Lights failed one by one, and the very structure of the station seemed to groan under the weight of an impossible presence. Finally, High Chancellor Morden spoke. His buzzing voice was barely a whisper. What are your terms? Death's form solidified slightly, becoming more human-like in appearance. When it spoke, Tejo's original personality seemed to surface through the cosmic force that had taken his place. The terms are simple. The Galactic Council is dissolved. Each species will govern itself, but all will recognize Earth's authority in matters of galactic peace and security. Ambassador Vextar tried to object. You cannot simply overthrow thousands of years of established order. I can, Death replied, calmly. I am doing it now. It gestured toward the walls of the chamber where displays showed the locations of Council fleets throughout the galaxy. One by one, the displays went dark. Our ships, General Krixnar gasped, are experiencing what you might call technical difficulties, Death explained. My colleagues are visiting your fleets as we speak. War is introducing himself to your admirals. They are finding their weapons age beyond use. Their armor crumbles to dust, and their crews grow old and weak within minutes. Dr. Yex's branches drooped with despair. You are destroying our entire military? We are removing your ability to threaten others, Death corrected. Your crews will live, but they will return home with a clear understanding of what happens to those who oppose humanity. Your weapons will be scrap metal, your ships will be barely functional, and your leaders will know that worse fates await if they choose violence again. Park Minji watched the displays as reports came in from across the galaxy. Fleets that had been moving toward Earth were now sending distress calls. Ships that had been preparing for war were now requesting emergency assistance. In a matter of hours, the military might of the Galactic Council was being systematically dismantled. This is impossible, Ambassador Korth protested from his cracking tank. Our fleets number in the millions. Our technology is advanced beyond anything humans possess. Technology fails, Death said simply. It always does eventually. But we are not technology. We are the forces that existed before your first machine was built and will exist after your last ship turns to dust. High Chancellor Morden stood shakily on his insect legs. What about our colonies, our trade networks, our civilian populations? They will be protected, Death assured him, under human oversight. Species that cooperate will find their lives improved. Those that resist will discover what it means to face famine when their crops fail, war when their defenses crumble, pestilence when diseases spread through their cities, and death when their time finally comes. The threat was clear. Humanity now controlled forces that could destroy civilizations without firing a single weapon. They could cause famines, plagues, military defeats, and mass death simply by willing it to happen. You are making yourselves into tyrants, Dr. Yex accused. No, Death replied. We are making ourselves into guardians. The Council ruled through fear and violence. We will rule through inevitability. Work with us, and your people will prosper. Work against us, and face the natural consequences of opposing fundamental forces. Admiral Yoon Soo-jin's voice suddenly crackled through the communication system. Earth fleet requesting permission to dock. We have new orders for the diplomatic mission. Death smiled, an expression that looked strange on its void-like face. Permission granted. Tell Admiral Lee Dong-yuk that the negotiations are complete. Park Min-ji realized that this had all been planned from the beginning. The human fleets arriving now were not coming to rescue their diplomat. They were coming to oversee the transition of power. How long? She asked quietly. Death turned to her, its expression softening slightly. How long what, Min-ji? How long have you been planning this? How long has Earth been preparing for this moment? Since the day we learned what the Council really was, Death replied. Since the day we saw the records of the Corvani and knew that we would either submit or find another way to survive. The chamber's main doors opened, and Admiral Lee Dong-yuk entered with a small escort of human marines. He was an older man, with gray hair and steady eyes that had seen many battles. He looked around the chamber, taking in the scene of terrified alien delegates and the being that stood among them. Kim Tai-ho, he said formally. Earth Command sends its compliments. The mission is complete. The mission is complete, Death confirmed. The Council has agreed to new terms of galactic governance. The Admiral nodded as if this was exactly what he had expected. And the other missions? War reports success at the Centauri Naval Base. Famine has completed her work in the Rigel agricultural zones. Pestilence has finished her visit to the medical facilities on Kepler Station. All Council fleets have been neutralized. Park Min-ji stared at the Admiral. You knew. You all knew what he was. Admiral Lee Dong-yuk looked at her with sympathy. You were assigned to him precisely because you did not know. We needed someone who would react naturally to the Council's behavior. Your genuine shock and fear helped sell the illusion that we were just normal diplomats. She felt betrayed and confused. So I was just bait? You were proof, Death said gently. Proof that humanity still values normal human life. Proof that we have not abandoned our humanity completely, even as we have transcended it. High Chancellor Morden cleared his throat with a buzzing sound. What happens now? What will become of the Council species? Admiral Lee Dong-yuk pulled out a tablet that, unlike the alien devices, was still functioning normally. Earth has prepared reconstruction plans for all Council worlds. Your military forces will be reduced to system defense only. Your slave populations will be freed and given assistance in establishing their own governments. Your colonies will be reorganized under human supervision to ensure fair treatment of all inhabitants. And if we refuse? General Krixnar asked, though his voice lacked its previous arrogance. Death quotas form darkened, and the temperature in the chamber dropped even further. Then you will learn what it means to truly face the end of all things. But I do not think you will refuse. You are survivors, and survivors adapt to new circumstances. Over the following hours, the details of the new galactic order were worked out. Human administrators would oversee the transition. Council species would retain local autonomy, but would answer to Earth in matters of interstellar policy. Military buildups would be forbidden. Slavery would be eliminated. Fair treatment of all sentient beings would be enforced by beings who could not be bribed, intimidated, or killed. As the negotiations concluded, Park Min-ji found herself alone with the being that had once been her boss. Will you stay as Kim Tai-ho? She asked. Death considered the question carefully. I will remain as Earth's diplomatic representative to the galaxy. The name Kim Tai-ho serves that purpose well. But I am no longer the man who bore that name originally. Will, you miss being human? I remember being human, Death replied. That is enough. I chose this transformation to protect humanity. I do not regret the choice. She nodded, though tears ran down her face. I'll miss him, the real him. He lives on in me, Death assured her. His desire to protect others, his dedication to peace, his hope for a better future. These things are part of me now. Years later, Park Min-ji would serve as humanity's liaison to the reformed galactic government. She would oversee the liberation of slave species, the establishment of fair trade agreements, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts between different worlds. The galaxy learned to prosper under humanity's protection. Wars became rare because war itself stood ready to end them quickly. Famines disappeared because famine ensured fair distribution of resources. Plagues were controlled because pestilence understood disease better than any medical expert. And death, when it came, was no longer accompanied by the terror of genocide or mass extinction. On Earth, in a classified facility, Dr. Han So-young maintained the equipment that had made the final protocol possible. Sometimes she wondered if they had done the right thing. They had saved humanity, but at the cost of turning their protectors into something beyond human understanding. But then she would read reports from across the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were now free. Worlds that had been strip-mined were being restored. Children of all species could grow up without fear of war or oppression. Perhaps, she thought. Some prices were worth paying. In the depths of space, on patrol ships that moved between the stars, beings that had once been human stood watch over the galaxy. They were no longer mortal, no longer entirely human, but they remembered what it meant to hope for a better tomorrow. And in that memory, humanity's greatest victory lived on. They had not conquered the galaxy through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had transformed themselves into forces of nature itself, ensuring that their species and all others could live in peace. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of humanity had begun. And death, wearing the face of a diplomat in a perfectly tailored suit, stood guard over it all, ensuring that those who chose peace would prosper and those who chose